We are back to take a look at the Vaporesso Target 80. This is a kit that Vaporesso sent me, so thank you for that. Durable yet compact, perfect outdoor companion. Well, I'm not going to do a full promo on this. I just want to basically see what they intend this device to be, and then we'll pull it apart and we'll see if it meets that stats here that don't mean a great deal. 10 times stronger under the circumstance of falling from a height of 1.5 meters. But like 10 times stronger than what? I don't know, what, they just pick some other mod? So the claim to fame on this guy is rugged, tough, drop resistance, 36% bigger battery than, I don't know what, something, 3000 milliamp hour. It's an 80 watt maximum, more reasonable than having a 100 watt maximum. We saw on the Aegis S100 for a single AN650, because a 3000 milliamp hour internal cell is going to be a pretty similar size to an 18650. Still going to need to be probably 25 to 30 amp. I'm going to test that cell as well, throw that on the CBA and do some discharges, see if it meets the 3000 milliamp hour. So I'm not real keen on doing sort of full reviewy sort of things, but just like I do sort of some quick personal experience notes. The tank's been good. It uses the GTX cores, and the GTX cores are pretty decent. There's a whole lot of different types available, so kind of chances are you can find the one that works in the wattage range and restrictiveness that you want to vape in. There's a whole bunch. I think there's like 10 different GTX coils. It is a plastic tank. It means you can't smash the glass, at least, because that sucks. Drop your mod and you smash the glass and you're out somewhere and can't replace it. It's just a bit weird how it's they're calling it a pod. It's not really a pod. It's a two-piece tank, because it's magnetic, so I guess they want to be able to do that so they can call it a pod, but it's got a base on it with a 510, and the mod itself is just a completely standard 510 kind of internal cell mod. Pod's just the catchphrase. Everyone just wants to call everything a pod these days. It does spin very easily in the base. It's got a detent, but it doesn't really stay in there very well, so you can find that you'll accidentally adjust the airflow on this guy really easily. Just sort of spins all over the place. Pretty easy to change the coils. I quite like the GTX coils. I think they've been fine. I think I'm using the 0.2 ohm. So as far as the fill method goes on this tank, it's just a quick twist to pop it off. You've got the little membrane that you need a fine point bottle to be able to poke into. If that gasket doesn't seal, then it will just allow the liquid to drain straight out of the tank. The only one sort of weakness with that kind of design, but you know, as long as it seals, I think it's fine. Oh, one other thing I meant to mention. So this is going to be going back to the issues I had with the Gen and Gen S with the 510 coming apart, which quite a few did even when they updated it. And I did do a video and tried to break my Gen S, and it was really strong, but evidently people still are having that 510 come apart because they're commenting and saying, yeah, mine actually came apart and now I can't use a mod. Yeah, so they very deliberately said strong connection, referring to the 510, saying that there's 3 bigger screws on a bigger surface, in large surface, making 510 connection on top much stronger and more stable. I reckon that's in reply to the lack of confidence maybe these days with Vaporesso mods and 510s pulling apart, people having been maybe stung by having a Gen that failed, and now they're saying, look, it's bolted on well. I mean, mind you, 510s were always held on with screws like this into a metal body. This has been a common thing. It's nothing new. So we'll take a look at how big these screws are and how durable we think they're going to be. Yeah, it's a pretty good system when you just screw it straight to metal. Better than press fit. So that was a T5, but I've got a feeling it actually might have been a T6. So I wouldn't call them huge screws. Pretty standard, really. Not really any bigger than what you'd normally see. And yeah, so it's a pretty standard traditional 510 arrangement, which I'm completely fine with. I think that's good they've done that. It's not a 2-piece or anything tricky. It's literally a 510 module. It is screwed into metal, so that's good. It's not screwed into plastic. And we have got a silicone O-ring where it sits down into the mod body. Not overly tight. There is a bit of force required to get it to sit down into there, so yeah, that's okay. Would say it's internally sealed through the center of the 510, because obviously this guy moves every time you put a tank on and off, and it is tricky to seal something moving. Assume they have got some silicone sealing going on inside, and the soldering looks really nice and clean, nice and shiny. Good connection on the negative, which is sometimes a little bit tricky to do because it requires a fair bit of heat. Yep, all looks pretty decent. Trim piece comes off. The device is really light, like it Pretty sure it is metal, but you know, it's hard to tell when it's so light. Yep, and adhesive on the screen protector front plate thing. Yeah, a couple of hidden screws. Look how much brighter that screen is without this dark lens over it. I wish they wouldn't make the lenses dark, because yeah. So there's no sealing around the buttons, and especially the fire button. Fire button just sits in the gap. Obviously presses on the button on the board. And then the front plate sits on top. It's a pretty close fit around that button, nice and tight fit, but there is still a pathway, like it's not sealed, so there's a pathway for liquid to possibly enter. Probably won't enter underneath this screen because it's got a lot of sticky stuff holding it on, but it could enter through that gap, and the board is right underneath. It would be nicer to see a membrane or something like that. They don't specifically state any liquid ingress rating, but you know, outdoor tough mod sort of implies it. So yeah, just be aware that the button doesn't seal off against any liquid. So if you end up with a whole lot of liquid on the front of the device, or you know, if you drop it in water or get it fully wet, it's not a sealed device. Okay, bottom piece off, and it all comes apart just with those two screws. So yep, that is metal. It's easy to tell once you've got it apart. Okay, small foam pad down the bottom. We've got some battery venting, which thoughtfully has a small screen across it. Stop any crap getting in through there. That little screen won't protect against liquid ingress. So yeah, obviously not an ingress rated, liquid ingress rated device. At least it will be keeping sort of dirt and big chunky stuff out. It's a nice fine screen, and that foam appears to be really just for quality of fit and probably preventing rattles. You can see where these two little rails of metal have been resting against that foam. It's not for insulation or to protect the battery or anything. That's kind of nice. I like to see little touches like that where they think, oh, we'll just put a little bit of foam there just so when it fits together it'll be a bit nicer, and it won't, you know, just keep a bit of pressure on it, maybe not rattle as much. That's a nice feature. And easily we're straight into the board this time. Looking very dry, so probably no conformal coating. I'd say no conformal coating. We have a little silicon cover bumper sort of guy sitting on top of the fire switch. Nice touch to give you a decent feel on the button so the button doesn't wobble around. But they have used the very small tactile switch for the fire button. And in the S100, I did like that they used the bigger, heavier duty fire switch. Whereas, yeah, we can see that the fire switch is exactly the same as the up-down switches. Yeah, not great, because they're so small. You're mashing that button every time you go to fire it, so it does cop a bit of abuse. The borders really firmly fit into this case, which is interesting. Oh yeah, it comes apart really nicely. I like that. That's plastic. That's why it's so light. Okay, so this inner guy, plastic. The front plate is metal, for sure, and so is this guy. But the inner middle part is all plastic, and then you'd have the benefit of the board and the cell sitting inside a insulated plastic layer. You know, there's nothing it can short out on, snugly fit inside. I think the finish won't hold up because that's sort of metallized plastic, but I actually quite like that. Just at first thought, I do really like the fact that that battery is really safely tucked away in a insulating piece of plastic, and it's a nice firm fit. Don't have to worry about the battery ends shorting out, and they've gone and put a foam. It's really common, they pretty much always do this. I think it's well, it's insulation as well as to get it nice and firm so the battery's not rattling around. Foam pad on that end, another foam pad on this end over the positive contact, and all looking pretty good. It's a 3.7 volt cell, standard voltage lithium, not a high voltage model, and 11.1 watt hour would be 3000 milliamp hour, correctly rated, and it's a 23600, so it's a bit shorter than an 18650, only by 5 mil, but 23, so it's a fair bit wider, which generally these kind of wrapped up LiPo cells don't perform quite as well as the top 18650s, so they they often are just that little bit bigger to get the same performance. Pretty standard size. We do see these in a lot of different pod devices. Can't even remember what that's out of. Freemax, I think. I don't know, yeah, same sort of deal. 23600. Yeah, same size. And the board is not glued, stuck down to the cell with some adhesive foam pads. I think that's good as well. More shock absorbing, even though it's more shock absorbing for the cell actually, because the board is screwed into the plastic frame, but the cell will be cushioned against that, so it kind of can't move that way, and it's not really going to move that way because of the two foam pads. So yeah, that's some nice protection for the cell. Some kind of conformal coating, just a little bit of shininess along these components. All right, check this out. Get out the old UV light. There's that conformal coating. Very handily UV reactive, and obviously just on those components. I've seen this before where they'll actually put sort of a mask over certain components and they'll spray them just with conformal coating, like they want to just isolate it. The USB-C socket, I mean, again, great they're using USB-C these days. It's mounted on its own small board, and then the board is soldered onto the main board, maybe to get the spacing, the depth, how they want it. Current shunt there to the atomizer output. That's for current monitoring. Another inductor down here, which would be for the charge circuit, I would say. Fairly solid inductor there, fairly chunky inductor for a charge circuit, which means the charge circuit would be a switch mode type instead of a linear, which is good because they generate less heat when they're charging. And same deal where they have a plastic frame around the screen, and the plastic frame just pops into holes in the board. As almost all of the boards, it's a soldered on ribbon connection. So yeah, if the screen goes out for whatever reason, next to impossible, extremely difficult to change the screen. Yeah, this whole thing of companies naming their boards like, what is it, Axon? They're just all the same. I mean, there's different firmware, so they do operate differently. Some will operate better than others, sure, but in the end, all you've got is a microcontroller and a voltage converter and some other stuff to make it work. That's pretty much all it is. It's not like they've got a magic chip that other guys don't have. You know, every different brand calls their board a something board. I know Geek Vape, I think, calls their board something else as well. Like they name their own board like a something chip, and it's just not a thing. It's not a thing at all. It's just a microcontroller. There's nothing special between them. It's just a marketing thing to name it. Alright, we will put up the discharge graphs of the cell and just see how good this guy is, see if it meets the specs. So the internal cell hit 2930 milliamp hour in the capacity test, which is a bit lower than we'd want to see. Really should be hitting 3050 to 3100 to be a proper 3000 milliamp hour rated cell, but like we're not too far off either. Definitely better than putting in just a completely wrongly rated cell like Geek Vape did in the M100. But you know, it's there. It's alright. And overall, look, I quite like it as a design. There's nothing really too wrong with it. The cell is really nicely protected in the insulating inner plastic assembly. The frame is pretty decent the way it's wrapped around the inner. There is a chance if it gets a big drop it could break that screw out, and I'm not sure it's really super more durable than a normal well-designed mod, but I'm not finding any problems with it. I quite like it. I really just like this battery protection. O-ring on the 510. I'd have to give it a kind of a middle score for the ingress protection. Middle to low. Pretty much normal for any other device. No real liquid ingress protection above a normal mod. Now as far as physical durability, there's nothing to test it against on what they say on the website. 10 times stronger. It doesn't say than what. I can't see why it would be as much as 10 times stronger. Like we've seen other devices that have full metal frames and boards that are well screwed in. So I mean, I'm not giving it crap. It is nicely put together, and that's about all I've got for you. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers.